This is Miss Amanda Hill, and her class will be serving hors d'oeuvres, and they're available for you now. Would you like to share anything about your class?
Thank you. I teach the culinary arts pathway here at Southwest. We've prepared all of the food here on the site with our first and second year students. If you have any questions, feel free to ask any of the servers walking around or myself. Enjoy your evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Performing for us right now, under the direction of Dr. Bussey, is our Sabbatha Southwest High School Orchestra. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Deborah Minjares, and I'm going to sing La Llorona. I hope you enjoy.
Salías de un templo un día, llorona, cuando al pasar yo te vi. Salías de un templo un día, llorona, cuando al pasar yo te vi. El que no sabe de amores, llorona, no sabe lo que es martirio. El que no sabe de amores, llorona, no sabe lo que es martirio. No sé qué tienen las flores, llorona, las flores del campo santo. No sé qué tienen las flores, llorona, las flores del campo santo. Que cuando las mueve el viento, llorona, parece
Well, good evening, everybody. Are you having a good time? Yes, okay. And let's give it up for our two soloists came down here and Elaine and Debbie. Well, I'm Steve Spataro, the Savapa music director, and I'm the guy that has the pleasure and honor to be involved with this wonderful group of young people. We're going to sing a corrido de Cesar Chavez in honor of the events for tonight.
So thank you to Southwest High School Choir and the SAVAPA program. Let's give them a round of applause. And the orchestra, who's already gone out, and also our folks from our culinary arts program, Cafe 56, and our students who are still serving food and all the food they prepared for us. So thank you to everyone who's there. My name is Dr. Ward Andrus. I'm the Superintendent of Schools for Central Union High School District. I'm filling in for our board president, Ms. Diana Garcia Ruiz. She is unable to be with us tonight. She is not feeling well, and so she's following the appropriate COVID protocols, right? Not making light of that, but she's just not feeling well tonight. So I'm pitch hitting. So again, thank you to, we're going to start out with a few thank yous and recognize some dignitaries. First of all, thank you to one of our sponsors, Southern Cal Gas Company. Thank you very much. Mana de Imperial Valley, or Imperial Valley, thank you. And of course, thank you to the high school district, Central Union High School District. We want to thank, again, we've recognized our folks from our student performance groups, but special thanks goes out to a few additional individuals. Ms. Heidi Rodriguez, Gretchen Lau, Lupe Quintero, Judge Juan Ulloa, Jose Padilla, El Central Councilwoman Martha Singh, Norma Sierra Galindo. Any of those folks here tonight? I think I saw some folks. Yes, okay, step forward, raise your hand. We're so grateful to have had you participate and support us in this effort to bring this about. It's a wonderful event to honor one of our own, the late Judge Cruz Reynoso and his life. So I'm going to try to do this in Spanish. Bienvenidos alumnos, familias y comunidad de este evento en honor de César Chávez y el honorable juez Cruz Reynoso. Gracias a nuestros patronizadores, la Compañía de Gas del Sur de California, Mana de Valle de Imperial y el Distrito Escolar Preparatoria Central Union. Gracias a mí, ok. Estoy leyendo. Mayormente nuestros jóvenes y también el equipo, ¿cómo se dice? Team. Equipo de este edificio de theater, de Jimmy Cannon Theater. Thank you a ellos que ellos están exportándonos. Again, otra vez, señora Heidi Rodriguez, a usted, gracias. Gretchen Lau, Lupe Quintero. There's the El juez Juan Ulloa. Jose Padilla, y Martha Singh. Norma Sierra Galindo. So again, gracias a todos ustedes. Espero que todos ustedes están aquí. There are a few additional dignitaries we'd like to recognize. Miss Judge Juan Ulloa, Kylie Rodriguez, our superintendent of Meadows is here tonight. Alex Cardenas, IID Director, back here in the back. Thank you, Alex. We've already mentioned Norma, I think twice, those faces, yeah? Okay. Okay, otra vez, Norma Sierra Galindo. Again, Ms. Quintero is here. Edgar Garcia. There he is, Edgar Garcia. We mentioned Martha Singh. Again, this time, we're doing this a couple times. Mr. Thomas Olivas. Judge Flord. Thank you. And again, one of our sponsors, Ms. Deborah McGarry from Public Affairs and SoCal Gas. Thank you, Deborah. And I apologize, English and Spanish, we did that a couple of times. It's fun to be here and try and take someone else's shoes in preparation for that. We're glad to be here. We're glad to be a partner with this event with Mana to celebrate Judge Cruz Reynoso. What a tremendous impact he's had on all of our lives. And that's why we're here, to remember what he's done for our community and the communities around the state, and in many ways around the country. So I'd like to turn time over now to, on the program, it's Maria Pinedo, and she has a couple of hats. Currently, we're going to recognize her as part of the school board. She's part of the Central Union High School District School Board and also part of MATA. So, Ms. Maria Pinedo.
Good afternoon, everybody. Muy buenas tardes a todos. My name is Maria Peinado. I'm the Central Union High School District Trustee. Mi nombre es María Peinado. Soy parte de la mesa directiva del Distrito Escolar de Preparatorias del Centro. Thank you so much for making the time to come and honor Cruz Reynoso this afternoon. Muchísimas gracias a todos ustedes por tomarse el tiempo para venir a reconocer a un gran héroe de nuestra comunidad, el señor Cruz Reynoso, en el día de César Chávez. Voy a hablar un poco de quién fue Cruz Reynoso, su biografía y un poco de por qué celebramos el día de César Chávez. Y luego vamos a oír algunos comentarios y palabras del del juez Juan Ulloa y de Lupe Quintero, que lo conocieron personalmente. Thank you very much for joining us to celebrate and observe Cesar Chavez Day and celebrate the extraordinary legacy of Judge Cruz Reynoso. Thank you especially to the Southern California Gas Company for always supporting local educational efforts in Imperial County and for being a partner for today's event. Thank you, MANA, the Imperial Valley, as well. Dr. Andrews had the foresight, I want to mention, to purchase the movie that we're going to see tonight so that our district will be able to view it not only today, but will now be available in our district for our teachers and students so they can use it as part of their curriculum. Thank you so much, Superintendent Andrews, for embracing this effort and accommodating our vision. Es realmente un honor estar aquí reunidos con ustedes para celebrar el Día de César Chávez y el legado del juez Cruz Reynoso. Gracias a la Compañía de Gas del Sur de California por apoyar y patrocinar programas como este educativos. Gracias también a nuestro superintendente, el doctor Andrews, por tener la idea de comprar el derecho de ver la película, no solamente esta noche, pero también estará disponible para nuestros alumnos y para el uso de nuestros maestros también. Muchísimas gracias. I want to start by saying that Cesar Chavez and Cruz Reynoso were both extraordinary Mexicanos that accomplished extraordinary things for the Mexican Latino community in the United States. Cesar Chavez Day, a little bit about Cesar Chavez Day. Cesar Chavez Day is a state holiday in California observed on March 31st. Cesar was born in Yuma, Arizona, and was the co-founder of the United Farm Workers alongside Dolores Huerta. He led the struggle for better rights for farm workers and made the world aware of the struggles of farm workers for better pay and safer working conditions. He became the best known Mexican labor leader and civil rights activist. Cruz Reynoso. Unfortunately, I did not know Mr. Cruz Reynoso, but I grew up knowing about him and the legend that he was. Words that have been said to describe Judge Cruz Reynoso was humble, empathetic, compassionate, soft-spoken, and legal giant. Judge Ulloa and Lupe Quintero and Jose Padilla will be sharing who Cruz Reynoso was as a person. And I can tell you that Cruz Reynoso had many firsts. He was one of 11 children born into a farm worker family. He advocated for farm workers, immigrants, and the indigent. He served 2 years in the Army, and he was the only Latino in his 1958 graduating class when he graduated from law school at Berkeley. He made a choice to start his legal career here in El Centro, and he was the first Latino director of the California Rural Legal Assistance. He was a college law professor at UCLA and UC Davis. And one of the accomplishments where he smashed barriers in the legal field was becoming the first Chicano-Latino member of the California Supreme Court in 1982. In 2000, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Bill Clinton. Judge Cruz Reynoso passed away at the age of 90 in May of last year. We honor him for his enduring legacy of fighting for justice for the most marginalized people and his efforts to address social inequalities and public service. Judge Cruz Reynoso showed us that there are no limitations to what we can accomplish. El juez Cruz Reynoso falleció el pasado mayo a la edad de 90 años. Lo recordamos por su legado de luchar por las personas más marginadas de nuestra sociedad y por su esfuerzo de toda una vida de responder a las inequalidades sociales. El juez Reynoso nos enseñó que no existen límites que no podemos lograr. Fue y seguirá siendo un ejemplo a seguir. As a proud daughter of a farm worker parents, it is extremely special to celebrate the life and legacy of a true Mexican warrior and local hero. For our students of Mexican descent, and especially those who come from farm worker and immigrant backgrounds, I want to tell you, be proud of your heritage. Your history, our history as farm worker families is valuable. And know that our school district, the Central Union High School District, values your life experiences and the contributions of our families. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention this as we end National Women's History Month, to congratulate that we've made history in California, once again in Imperial Valley. Patricia Guerrero was named the first Latina appointed to the California Supreme Court, and our Honorable Ruth Bermudez Montenegro was confirmed by UN Senate as U.S. Magistrate Judge this month. So a round of applause for that. So now I'll pass it to Honorable Judge Juan Ulloa.
Thank you, Maria. So it's a great honor for me to say a few words about Cruz Reynoso. Many people here in the room know him as well as I do, perhaps better. So it's really a privilege for me to have the opportunity to say a few words and share some personal personal memories that we had from him. Our paths crossed a couple of times over the years. Es un gran honor y un privilegio tener la oportunidad de hacer unas palabras de mi conocimiento y contacto con el justicia, no juez, Cruz Reynoso. Nuestros caminos pasaron varias ocasiones por medio de nuestro trabajo y las vidas. Hay muchos aquí en el Valle que lo conocen igual o mejor que yo, pero lo que quiero decir de él es no nomás que fue un león de la justicia, no nomás que fue reconocido por todo el mundo por sus contribuciones, pero es uno de los nuestros, humilde, muy respetuoso, de una manera muy amable, pero un león de la ley, un león de la justicia. So there's very many reasons why Cruz Reynoso is important to us, but most importantly, I want to say that he's important to us because he's one of ours. He's one of ours. Justice Reynoso, not Judge, with all due respect. Justice Reynoso made an impact not only here in California and the nation, but around the world. He was soft-spoken. He was very warm, very personal. But he was a warrior and a lion of justice. Then his legal career started at El Centro. That's true. But his justice career started as a child, as you'll see in the documentary. The most important thing I can share with you is I think something that he shared with me about being a judge. He said, and you know, it's been a long time, so I may have mixed the details about it, but I'll say that to be a lawyer, you have to have the law in your mind. You have to know the law, you have to know the statutes. To be a lawyer, you also have to have passion and feel the energy and the sense of right and wrong that comes from your heart. But to be a judge, you have to listen to your justice bone. And your justice bone is going to help you find the balance between what's right and what's the law. Where do you find your justice bone? Your justice bone is somewhere between your head, where the law resides, and your heart, where passion resides, somewhere in the neighborhood of your elbow. So, voy a compartir nomás un consejo que me dio Justicia Reynoso hace muchos años, y es esta. Unos principios que yo creo que guiaron a su vida. Para ser un abogado es importante conocer la ley, conocer los estatutos, tenerlos en la cabeza, pero también hay que tener pasión, hay que tener empeño y tener corazón. Pero para ser juez es importante poner atención al hueso justicia. ¿Dónde reside ese hueso de justicia? Reside entre la cabeza y el corazón, más o menos en el codo. So, there's so many other things that people can say. There are people here that had connections with him, and I wish we could all talk about Justice Reynoso. And I just want to close with this. I think it's very important. We were so blessed to have had Justice Reynoso not only in the world and as a nation and as a state, but here in Imperial County. He started his legal career here. And his law practice with John Duddy was primarily focused on workers' compensation laws, on workers' compensation rights and work injury and unsafe conditions. And how important is that to everything that he did in his whole career after that? So, en final voy a decir nomás que en la carrera legal de Justicia Reynoso comenzó aquí, en la oficina, abogando por el trabajador y las condiciones de empleo. Y eso es algo que fue uno de los enfoques de su carrera. Después, como van a oír del CRLA, como van a oír de la Corte Apelativa y la Corte Suprema. Así es que muchas gracias por oírme unos minutos, y el documentario de la vida de Justicia Reynoso no la he visto, así es que hay que ir a verla y no pasar mucho más tiempo. Muchas gracias por su tiempo.
Thank you, Judge Ulloa. Lastly, we'll hear from Lupe Quintero, Director of Community Workers with the California Rural Legal Assistance. La última ponente será Lupe Quintero, Directora de Trabajadores Comunitarios de CRLA.
Good evening, everyone. Muy buenas noches a todos. A sincere thank you to all the organizers and sponsors for celebrating Cesar Chavez Day and also celebrating the legacy of another great humanitarian, Justice Cruz Reynoso. I first met Senor Reynoso in the late 60s when I was hired at the California Rural Legal Assistance, CRLA, as a part-time community worker in the El Centro office. When I first came to work for CRLA, I didn't know very much about the program. But in a very short time, I would learn what a dynamic organization I worked for, in that CRLA was the first non-profit legal firm that was founded to represent farm workers and the rural poor. When then California Governor Ronald Reagan was in office in the late 60s and in later years, he attempted to balance his budget on the backs of the poorest of the poor by cutting funds for state Medi-Cal and food stamps. Senor Reynoso and CRLA saw the injustice in that and challenged the governor in court. CRLA won and saved millions of dollars in funds to keep these much-needed programs intact. This was an incredible victory for this new legal firm. While it won favor in the community, CRLA had made an enemy in a very powerful governor. As time passed, the agricultural industry took more and more notice of CRLA's action in helping farm workers. Complaints were filed against employers when workers were robbed of their wages or when no toilets and no drinking water were provided in the fields. Many of the growers began complaining to their state representatives or went straight to the governor. They complained because CRLA was forcing these employers to abide by the law, something they weren't accustomed in doing. So the governor, who had an axe to grind with CRLA, and the ag industry, who didn't like the fact that we were helping their workers enforce their rights, joined in their effort to do away with the CRLA once and for all. They wanted CRLA to be completely defunded. I didn't think at first that it was any really big thing, any big deal. After all, CRLA had beat the governor before. Why not again? Well, this time it was different. There were two very powerful sources coming after us with everything they had. We were accused of many things. The one most threatening was that of misuse of funds. We were accused of misusing funds to help the United Farm Workers simply because we helped farm workers. It wasn't true. We were accused of using funds to take on cases that we weren't supposed to do. Not true. There were so many false accusations. Regardless, we had to respond in front of some committee or commission, and we had to get ready. It was a very frightening time because we could get defunded. Many of our program attorneys, House counsel, outside counsel, all were constantly meeting with Cruz to strategize on our response. Simply put, we were being attacked because we were effective in our work. We were helping the poorest of the poor. We were helping the poor, and we were slowly bringing about change in people's lives. CRLA was not going to give up 1 inch to these people in power. At the end of the day, as executive director of CRLA, the pressure fell on Senor Reynoso's shoulders. He was our spokesperson and understood clearly, Cruz understood clearly what was at stake. This master of the law was fearless. He presented our case and saved CRLA. CRLA won against some very powerful people who now hated CRLA even more. Senor Reynoso was my hero, and I was just so very proud to be part of CRLA. I knew that I was surrounded by some of the greatest people that I could ever hope to work with. I knew that I wanted to stay with CRLA and continue fighting the good fight. Throughout the years, our program held statewide training conferences, and Senor Reynoso was always invited, and he always attended. No matter what, Senor Reynoso was always with us. Remember, CRLA was his baby. As I said, Senor Reynoso saved CRLA. Senor Reynoso went to the conferences as guest speaker. He participated in the trainings, in the workshops. He would meet with attorneys, with the community workers, with all staff. Everybody wanted to speak with him. He was so accessible. He was the program's mentor. He especially loved encouraging and teaching each new batch of attorneys, and with the more seasoned attorneys, he would encourage to do more. To the community workers, he would tell us to keep educating the attorneys about community needs and to push priority areas of work. I remember things he would tell all the staff. Always be prepared. Always fight your best fight. You are just as good and worthy as anybody. Be respectful to others. Don't be afraid. Be persistent. Don't be afraid to take necessary risks. Be creative. Senor Reynoso himself was resilient. Whenever Senor Reynoso was with us, I felt safe. I felt protected. And why was that? Simple. I had known him as a man who didn't just talk, but took action. He fought for a program against all odds and won. He always believed in CRLA because he saw the good that the program did and knew to continue was vital. Yes, Senor Reynoso will always be one of my greatest heroes, whom I was so fortunate to have worked for. I continue working in CRLA, and I'm so very proud of all the good work that my co-workers carry out each day as we continue fighting the good fight, keeping Senor Reynoso's legacy alive. The naysayers said that at the most, CRLA would last maybe 7 years. This September, we will celebrate our 56th year. Que viva Cruz Reynoso y CRLA. Thank you.
We appreciate you sharing with us, and we know what Cruz Reynoso and his legacy means to you. So the Central Union High School District would like to give you this image that you can put in your office. So this is So if you want to move yourself, there's entrances to your right and to your left. So please join us inside the theater. Hello, everybody. So before we get started, I just wanted to share a few words about Jose Padilla. Jose Padilla unfortunately was not able to attend, but he did send a message. Jose Padilla was born and raised in Imperial Valley to parents who came from farm worker families. Padilla has devoted his legal career to serving the needs of California's poor through his work with the California Rural Legal Assistance, CRLA, a legal services program that serves the state's rural counties. During his years as CRLA Executive Director, Padilla has been an advocate for the poor in rural counties on issues such as housing, labor, education, civil rights, immigration, pesticides, environmental law, and legislative representation. After graduating from Stanford University, Padilla was a head teacher with Campesinos Unidos. He later earned his law degree from Berkeley, which launched his legal career with CRLA. Padilla has testified before President Clinton's Commission on Race and the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and served on the boards of the Poverty and Race Research Action Council and the National Legal Aid and Defender Association. He has been recognized by the Los Angeles San Francisco Daily Journal as one of the 100 most influential Hispanics in the United States. Although Mr. Padilla wasn't able to attend this event in person, he sent a video message which we will view before today's movie. El señor Padilla se crió en el Valle Imperial con padres que fueron parte de una familia de trabajadores del campo. Padilla ha dedicado su carrera legal al servir las necesidades de personas con pocos recursos con su labor en la Asistencia Legal Rural de California, un programa que ofrece servicios en condados rurales. Durante sus años como director ejecutivo, Padilla ha abogado por las personas en temas como vivienda, trabajo, educación, derechos civiles, pesticidas y representación legislativa. Después de graduarse de la Universidad de Stanford, el señor Padilla terminó sus estudios en leyes en la Universidad de Berkeley. El señor Padilla testificó ante la Comisión de Raza del presidente Clinton y la Comisión de Derechos Civiles de Estados Unidos. Ha sido reconocido como uno de los 100 hispanos más influyentes de Estados Unidos. El señor Padilla no nos pudo acompañar en persona, pero envió un mensaje que podemos ver antes de la película. Muchas gracias al señor José Padilla. A little bit about the film. The film Cruz Reynoso, Sowing the Seeds of Justice, is a biography that follows Cruz as he rises from humble beginnings to fight discrimination and inequality as a lawyer, a judge, and a teacher. The film was produced by Abby Ginsberg and narrated by the legendary Luis Valdez. It received the award for Best Feature-Length Documentary from the Sacramento Film and Music Festival and is made available through Berkeley Media. Thank you very much, and again, we thank the Southern California Gas Company for their generous donation to make sure that this movie is available not only today, but for the rest of the year for the Central Union High School District staff, the teachers, and the students. So thank you very much, Southern California Gas Company, for your support. And now we'll start our movie.
Cruz, a person, was a special man born with justice in his heart. I always say that God broke the mold when Cruz served among us and ended his justice journey. He was a man of faith. He was a believer. He also even had a sense of humor. His humor once led him to say that just as other people are born with a funny bone, he said that he was born with a justice bone. That is, that he would react when he always saw injustice in front of him. And as Cruz, a person, perhaps the most telling characteristic of his person was that he carried humility in his being. It was essential, Cruz, to be humble. I would always say that I've never known a person who would speak to a Supreme Court justice or to a mayor of a town or to a person in charge of a state agency just the same way that he would speak to a farm worker. That was the Cruz Reynoso, the Cruz Reynoso that I knew, the man of humility. Let me talk about Cruz, the native son, El Señor Reynoso. Both Cesar Chavez and Cruz, for me, were native sons. Like Cruz, Cesar was not born in Imperial Valley, but Cesar did go to local schools. Cesar Chavez lived for a very short period of time in Brawley and was a migrant who knew my family personally. He knew my two aunts, my tia Socorro, my tia Teresa, who lived in Brawley. And our family would talk about how the Padilla family and the Reynoso, the Cesar Chavez family would migrate together up north when they were going up to pick the crops. But that was Cesar Chavez. And here we're celebrating the Cesar Chavez holiday. But my comments are not about Cesar, but they're about Cruz Reynoso. I always say that before I met Cruz, before I met Professor and Justice Reynoso, I knew about him because the local community in Imperial Valley, where I was raised in the 1950s, came to know him as the first Spanish-speaking attorney there, el Señor Reynoso. The valley that Cruz came to know in the 1950s, where he was practicing, was a segregated place, with both El Centro and Brawley's east side being disproportionate ethnic. The east side, El Centro, was disproportionately black, and the east side of Brawley was disproportionately Mexicano. And that was the segregated place that Cruz Reynoso came to when he joined the Duddy law firm. It was a valley that had never known a Latino attorney, and he became the first attorney with a Mexicano last name. Fue el primero. When I talked to my parents about Cruz Reynoso, this person, they would always fondly say, el Señor Reynoso. And they would then talk about his local reputation. Señor in this context was, like it is today, a word of high respect. But also Señor, in terms of Cruz Reynoso, was Cruz the gentleman. It really meant a gentle man, a person of gentle soul. And as the Mexicano community spoke of him, Señor Reynoso was un hombre de palabra, un hombre de carácter y de valor, a person of his word and a person who lived by high values that he learned from life. Whereas my grandmother, San Juana, from Brawley would say, él era un hombre educado, como tu abuelo. And so as Cruz, a person I came to know, he was known because of his humility that set him apart from any other person. I would also talk about Cruz as Imperial Valley's first legal aid. Many times when I speak in the Valley, I've said that even before legal aid came into the Valley in 1966, when CRLA opened its Centro office, Cruz Reynoso was legal aid. He was CRLA even before CRLA existed. The Cruz Reynoso of that myth was the person who the Mexicano community knew as the person that they would go to when they needed legal service. In those neighborhoods before Cruz, the only law that people knew was the criminal law. Law as somebody who would punish you when you violated its provisions. But when Cruz came, the people of Imperial Valley came to understand what civil legal aid was all about. And as people told it, as my family told it, Latino families, the Latino poor would go to the Reynoso household on Saturdays and Sundays. They would go to Janine's and Cruz's home and ask him about what their legal problems were all about. And so they were open to that community. Cruz was the one that showed those communities in those early years of private practice with the Duddy Reynoso law firm, and it was wasn't about civil, criminal law punishing people, but it was civil law, a friend of the people in poverty, a legal tool to help the segregated community, and a legal tool that could help them, the workers, the farm workers who needed assistance. And it was his practice to do workers' compensation cases as part of that legal practice with John Duddy. But let me talk about Cruz the hero and the role model. So in my limited knowledge of Latinx or Chicano history, there are only a handful of Latinos whose example of social justice activism or public service are role models to emulate and follow. There have only been three for me, those heroes and role models: Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, and Cruz Reynoso. Today, we speak of Cruz. And although Cruz was less in the public eye of those times than both Cesar and Dolores, Cruz was equally a civil rights hero, and for me, a mentor, and introducing many of us to those lofty notions of civil rights causes, about labor rights, and about how to be a public servant. So on this occasion of remembering the late Cruz Reynoso, I begin by saying that, like Cesar, Cruz had a lifelong commitment to the betterment of our community in the manner that he practiced social justice as a rural private attorney, and then later on as a director of CRLA, and then later on as a jurist and as a law school professor. And in all of those roles, he became a role model. So as a role model, walking on that justice road, what are his lessons for those of us here in this audience listening to me today? What does Cruz's life teach us? First, I think for me, the first lesson was his attitude was formed by the way he lived his own segregated youth. Like Cesar Chavez, he would say that at some point along the way, Cesar said, I took it personal. That is, you take your personal sense of injustice and then you convert it into social service, into social obligation, into social responsibility. And so that when you do it effectively, that's when your actions lead to the remedies for social injustice. They lead to integration. They lead to equity, equality. They all become social justice. And that is the lesson that Cruz showed us by his life. And whatever our profession we choose, there will always be a social injustice to correct. And if it is in front of us, Cruz would say, it is up to you to change it. And the second lesson I want us to remember is that even if we come from humble roots, like a farm worker family, we each can pursue our dream. For me, both Cruz Reynoso's and Cesar's legacies showed us that the immigrant community that raised us always needs the best from us. Many of you here in the audience are in high school now, will be in college tomorrow. Do not let anyone convince you that your dream is not possible. Cruz would have said, whatever dream you have, follow it, even if you are following that dream alone. And that's what he did. Cruz opened doors that didn't allow Latinos to enter. He walked through that door, and when then it was opened, it became the road for all of us, the rest of us, to follow. And Cruz became a valley attorney, a jurist, a law professor. Those were all doors that he opened, and he became the first to do those things. So here you are in high school. Many of you may think that you know what your future road is. Always be open to what life brings. Cruz, when he was a practitioner in that private law firm in Imperial Valley, he didn't know then that he was going to be a Supreme Court justice. And I learned from Cruz's example. I went to Stanford wanting to be a doctor, and then I came out of Berkeley Law School as a lawyer for poor people. So for all of us, if we continue to believe that we each can give back to our communities, give back, give of ourselves through whatever profession we decide to follow. Whether you decide to be a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse, law enforcement, or other public service that you decide to choose. You do it, and you do it from your heart. Don't be afraid to shoot for the very top. If you follow politics, then you become the mayor. You become the supervisor. You become the governor. ¿Por qué no? Cruz would ask you. And then when you decide what your road is, walk it selflessly, walk it humbly, con corazón, just as Cruz Reynoso walked it. And when you come across the injustice, or you can see that others can benefit from your work, whatever you choose to do, you then do just that. Offer your services so that others can benefit. That's what Cruz Reynoso, the justice teacher, taught us. That is what Cruz would have told you today. He was a gift to those of us so blessed to have been taught by his example. So I leave you with these words. Cruz Reynoso, hijo del pueblo, presente, que en paz descanses. Muchas gracias, and thank you again, Aide, for inviting me for this tribute to Cruz Reynoso, and thank you, all of you here in this audience, for having listened to me. Thank you very much.
One of the jobs of legal services lawyers is to challenge illegal laws and to challenge illegal administrative decisions that adversely affect the poor, to try to bring about some change for the poor people that really means something.
The year is 1969. Cruz Reynoso heads one of the nation's best anti-poverty programs. Reynoso is in a tight spot. On one side, his old friend, Cesar Chavez, demands that he support the movement to unionize farm workers. On the other side, Ronald Reagan, California's popular governor, attacks him as a liberal activist and threatens to cancel the program's funding. The legal services of over 1 million of our nation's poorest citizens and their right to decent housing, health care, and education hang in the balance. The son of farm workers, Cruz Reynoso walked a path where few had gone before. He was a champion of the rural poor, helping them better their lives. He was a trailblazer in his profession, helping many of humble origins attain positions of respect and power. As he advanced, he often found himself in the crosshairs of controversy. Yet guided by a strong moral compass, he was determined to enforce the guarantees of the Constitution for all. Throughout his career as a lawyer, California Supreme Court Justice and counselor on the national stage, Cruz Reynoso never forgot where he came from or on whose behalf he was fighting.
He's as gentle a human being as you can find, and yet he's as revolutionary a human being as you can find. Somebody who really wants to change the world.
Cruz Reynoso was born the third of 11 children to a farm worker family in Brea, California. To make ends meet, Cruz and his family traveled north to pick fruit during the harvest, often returning after the start of the school year.
By that time, there were 3 of us who were old enough to go to school. So we went to Wilson's school, but when we got there, we noticed that everybody there was Chicano or Latino. So we asked, why are we being sent to this school? And they said, you're being sent to this school to learn English. Well, since we already knew English, we were moderately suspicious that maybe that wasn't the reason. And later we found out it was a segregated school.
20 miles away from the Reynoso home, a case challenging the constitutionality of segregated schools was being argued in federal court. But for the Reynosos, education was not the primary concern.
My mother had a dream that her older boys would quit school at age 16, as most Mexican-American boys did in those days, and start working in the orange groves. She was rather disappointed that a couple of us continued with our education. She would tell the neighbors, mira qué flojos me resultaron mis hijos. En vez de andar trabajando, andan leyendo libros. She would say, look how lazy my older boys turn out to be. Instead of being out there working, they're still reading books.
When I grew up, Cruz was gone already. But we knew that here was this brother, I knew certainly, that was very bright and was reaching for things that I didn't see around me in the barrio.
I did have a sense that there was a better life, that I didn't want to grow up to be a farm worker.
With a vision reaching beyond his parents' horizon, Reynoso stayed in school and eventually won a scholarship to Pomona College. He served 2 years in the Army and with the help of the GI Bill, attended Bolt Law School, where he was the only Latino in his class. After passing the bar in 1958, Reynoso moved to El Centro, a small town near the California-Mexico border. He hung out a shingle and opened a small law office.
I never thought that it was enough just to do a job. One needed to do something beyond simply having a job to support your family. That's important, but the community and what was happening around you was always important to me.
Soon after arriving, Reynoso joined the Community Service Organization, or CSO, where he met a young activist named Cesar Chavez.
What struck me was that he knew what was important in terms of organizing the community. Voter registration and civic education so that citizens could really participate, because a democracy without participation means nothing.
The main concept of CSO is that if poor people, working people can come together and take on the responsibility of changing their lives, that they can make it happen.
And they saw that it was real. When they started being active politically and socially, they could actually make a difference in improving their community life and even their own personal lives. The issues in El Centro, California, related to the lack of power that poor people had. And I had seen it up and down California and knew that it existed throughout the country. We really needed a national program to face the issues that a democracy really has to deal with.
And this administration today, here and now, declares unconditional war on poverty in America.
In spite of the government's commitment, the poor were not receiving the benefits promised them. They needed help to enforce their rights.
The poor need deserve the same quality of legal services that the profession owes to all citizens.
At that time, legal aid was about urban legal aid, providing legal services to the urban poor. CRLA was the first rural program.
Beautiful, huh? Vámonos.
In 1966, CRLA opened its doors to serve California's 1 million rural poor.
Things were pretty bad. The farm worker wages were down to 50 cents an hour. You know, we needed an attorney. That attorney was not going to be available for you unless you had a lot of money, and farm workers didn't have that much money. So there were just a great need.
California had become produce market to the nation, and its agribusiness industry wielded great political influence. Determined to shine the national spotlight on the issues facing farm workers, Robert Kennedy held Senate subcommittee hearings in California's Central Valley.
That the farm workers have suffered in our society over the period of the last 30 years, and that situation has to be changed. It's a basic question of hope for the future. We're going to try to improve not just your lives, but more importantly, the lives of your children.
Heeding the call to help lift farm workers from poverty, young lawyers from around the country came west to fill the ranks of CRLA.
I realized I had many handicaps. I had never worked with farm workers. I grew up in Brooklyn. I knew nothing about agriculture, and I didn't speak Spanish. And I was a Brooklyn boy at sea.
CRLA's makeup as an all-white organization raised doubts about its effectiveness.
They felt that it was important not only to have a Latino, but to have somebody who had been a farm worker, who came from a rural area.
We needed somebody who could connect with both the farm workers and connect with government, and Cruz was perfect.
In 1968, Cruz Reynoso became CRLA's director.
Tell him that we're going to work on his eviction, and that we came here to tell him where we are in his unemployment case.
We needed desperately to have more Spanish-speaking lawyers. I used to tell people kiddingly that we were greatly successful in our recruiting of Latino lawyers after I got there. We recruited up and down California, and we were able to hire 50% of all of the Latino lawyers graduating from ABA accredited law schools that year. One.
You have to remember that was right after the civil rights movement. The farm workers movement was starting in California and just gaining lots of ground. And for we Hispanic students, we wanted to get in on the action, and one of the places where you could get in on that action was at CRLA, working with Cruz Reynoso.
When Reynoso took over as head of CRLA, his former colleague, Cesar Chavez, was intensifying his organizing in the fields. Leading boycotts, marches, and nonviolent resistance, Chavez ignited the farm workers' movement and made the nation aware of their struggle. What looked like a natural partnership between CRLA and the Farm Workers Union would soon become a source of conflict.
One of the most difficult issues that we had to deal with was the relationship with Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers Union. And the reason it was difficult was that Cesar expected that we would be his law firm. Why not?
I think Cesar was looking at CRLA as a resource. Here's some lawyers. What can I get them to do?
We're put in a position that we have to use all of the legal means at our disposal to...
It was thought that we would work closely with them. In fact, we could not. There was a lot of pressure from growers, and one of the conditions that we had accepted was that we would not represent the farm workers organization. We had always to be careful.
Despedimos de Fresno, nos despedimos con fe, para llegar muy contentos hasta el pueblo.
Cruz kept an even temper. He wasn't reacting to Caesar's demands in an unreasonable way. He was trying to point out that we do have differences here, but there may be ways that we can work together that don't jeopardize our funding, our institution, and can help you.
The position we took was that we were there to do a job. We had to sit back and ask ourselves the question, what are the big issues in rural California, particularly pertaining to farm workers?
Among all the work that I did out in the fields, the short-handle hoe was the worst. Even right now, I can't sit up straight. I have to sit leaning to one side or at a certain angle so that my back can rest, because the short handle is very bad.
The short-handled hoe is a brutal instrument because to use it, you have to be in this uncomfortable posture of bending over. The grower's argument is that it's a more efficient way of weeding than a long-handled hoe.
It kept farm workers' nose to the ground, kept them bent over. It really gave that message that you're not really an important person, you're inferior. It was another one of those humiliating and oppressive situations for workers, but even more, it really injured their health.
The first thing we did was took a survey comparing farm workers in Soledad and farm workers over in the San Joaquin Valley, and we learned that the incidence of permanent, totally disabling back problems was about twice as high where they use the short-handled hoe as where they don't. We then spoke to a number of doctors, and every one of them said there's no question that ruins people's back, bending over all day. What we want to do is completely have the hoe banned as a dangerous tool.
That's an example of the kind of work that was really CRLA at its best, because Mo gathered the documentation and was able to ban the short-handled hoe.
It represented so much. It was not just the fact that they could use a long-handled hoe. It was really like going for that big fight for dignity of workers. So it was a very symbolic victory for farm workers, I think, and for CRLA.
There was a change when the CRLA came to town. What kind of a change?
The big change was the attitude about the lawyer toward the client, and they make us feel like we were the president of Ford Motor Company.
I just felt a great sense of satisfaction that there we were able to help more than one person at a time. There were so many farm workers. Had we filed for each one individually, we would have been filing for 50 years. We were winning a lot of cases. And I would tell people, I think we're great lawyers, but we're not winning some of these cases because we're great lawyers. We're winning them because the violations are so clear.
For every ounce of federal help we get, we surrender an ounce of personal freedom.
Not surprisingly, CRLA's success did not sit well with Governor Reagan or his supporters.
The farmers don't like it, and neither does Governor Reagan. They think that poverty lawyers have become liberal social reformers who are unfairly using taxpayers' money to sue local, state, and federal governments.
And I have to tell you that any hopes I had in the beginning that this might be legal assistance to the rural poor are out the window.
Ronald Reagan had won the governor's race in a landslide, making him a national hero among conservatives. With agribusiness among his largest supporters, Governor Reagan took on CRLA.
We think that it's gone a little afield in which it's kind of become a promoter of social causes.
Reagan always hated CRLA. He accused us of undermining democracy. We had brought a case against local school districts because they had closed down the schools because the growers needed more workers at that time. And so we were now, according to Reagan, destroying agriculture.
He determines that the program is not beneficial to the people and is not fulfilling its original purpose.
I see here a deliberate attempt, a scheme, if you will, on the part of the governor to sabotage CRLA and legal services.
Governor Reagan probably will veto the program when it comes up for refunding in a few weeks.
So for the governor to then veto CRLA in an effort to destroy CRLA, all of a sudden,
CRLA and its fight took on national significance.
Yesterday, Governor Reagan of California vetoed a federal grant of almost $2 million for one of the most highly regarded of these programs, the California Rural Legal Assistance Organization.
Reagan gave former John Birch Society advocate Louis Euler the job of defending his veto of funding for CRLA.
Aren't you, to use a very trite expression, throwing out the baby to get rid of the bathwater?
No, on the contrary. I am not for a moment suggesting, nor are any of the authorities whose statements get presented here, suggesting that never has CRLA done anything worthwhile. That would be stupid.
We got the charges put together by Lou Euler and his investigators. He accused us of all kinds of terrible things. If we were guilty of half the things that he accused us of, we should all be in prison.
Lawyers for the CRLA are putting on a full defense, with witnesses claiming their only objective has been to give poor people the same legal representation other people have.
We know and they know and Reagan knows that these are 11th hour charges without foundation. And to equivocate in that sort of situation tells the poor, you know, here we go again. These guys talk about justice and all that, but to the poor, really, it's not that important that they have access to the courts.
The battle about CRLA was more of a part of a national battle to try to restrict the ability of lawyers to adequately represent poor people in legal services.
Congress is watching this case, so are poverty lawyers and state officials from all over the country. What happens here will help determine just how much freedom poverty lawyers are going to have to fight the legal battles of the poor.
My answer is that Mr. Euler, while
It was a dramatic time for us.
witnesses,
We weren't sure, frankly, whether we could win that battle. We knew we were right, but we didn't know whether we would succeed.
Our effort is to produce the truth.
We have already given them this book, which is a full and complete rebuttal of the first 12 charges.
The fight went on for 3 years, but ultimately, CRLA prevailed.
I've agreed with federal OEO to permit a short-term extension of the grant for CRLA.
I think the fact that there's an institution still there defending workers is a testimony to the ability of people like Cruz to navigate the shoals when you have enemies like Governor Reagan.
Cruz has to be credited for saving CRLA. Without Cruz Reynoso being at the helm at the time that he was there, and someone that felt so deeply the conviction that farm workers needed this organization to protect them, and not only farm workers, but other rural poor, there would be no CRLA.
During Reynoso's tenure at CRLA, the Chicano movement gathered steam, leading to demands to diversify colleges and universities.
I got phone calls from all over the country, schools asking if I was interested in teaching. I think because of the fame that we had in legal services circles, and because they were looking for Latinos.
When I was a law student, all of our professors were Anglo men, so we asked the dean if they could recruit, and they did. They went out and they recruited, and we got 2 candidates, final candidates, Cruz Reynoso and Leo Romero.
In 1972, Reynoso began teaching at the University of New Mexico, where he became one of the nation's first Latino law professors.
He had a tremendous impact on the school. He was adamant about trying to get more Hispanics into the law school and more Hispanics on the faculty. And by his demeanor, by his approach, by his reasoned arguments, etc., there wasn't any question that we were going to go in that direction.
Well, while he was teaching in Albuquerque, the farm was a very important part of his life. I know he would leave in the afternoon, late afternoon, to go tend to some of the farm animals, and then he'd come back late at night.
The deal was that if we moved to Albuquerque, my dad would buy my mom some land. So we go to Albuquerque, they bought 2 acres, and it ended up being just this really, really wonderful time in our lives.
I remember one time here at the law school, he received a box of little chicks, and you know, they're about really small, and they're making all these little chirping noises, and it was delivered here to the law school, and then he, of course, had to run down and take him back to his farm.
We ended up getting lots of animals. We had horses and pygmy goats, geese and chickens and ducks and rabbits, and the horses were my responsibility. I was the oldest and I got to do the horses. Yes, he is. They're excited.
So I was teaching in New Mexico, minding my own business. I had conceived of myself as spending the rest of my professional life in New Mexico. However, it just didn't turn out that way.
Back in California, Ronald Reagan's term was up, and a new governor took over.
I've been looking at the returns. I've been watching television, watching the wire services, and it's pretty obvious to me that you got a Democratic governor in 1975.
Jerry Brown came into office after 8 years of Ronald Reagan. So there were an awful lot of Democrats lined up for judicial appointments, aspiring to judicial appointments. So you're being importuned all the time by people who want a judicial position. In Cruz, we found the opposite.
I got a call saying, Cruz, the governor wants to appoint you to a very important position. And I said, I'm sorry, Tony, I'm in the middle of a semester. I can't accept.
We started getting phone calls from the governor's office in California. And as kids, we did not think that was a good thing. When the governor's office would call, my sister reminds me that we would go in the other room and quietly go, boo hiss, boo hiss.
Much to my surprise, he calls back a couple of months later. I said, what did you have in mind? He said, Court of Appeal.
He almost had to be talked into it. It wasn't something he was seeking. His family was against it because they were happily ensconced in New Mexico.
But eventually the decision was made, and we were going to move out to California.
We had been out in the country in New Mexico, so when we came here, the children wanted to bring all the animals with them.
There was no way we wanted to leave without these animals, so Dad decided if we were going to move, we were moving the critters with us.
We hired a gentleman to bring all those animals here, including even the chickens.
Rat Race. Rat Race, the little horse, he came with us from Albuquerque. And Dad still has Rat Race out at the ranch.
There you are.
He told me how shocked he was to learn that the aspects of his history that he was sure would disqualify him were now seen as, if anything, reasons to appoint him.
I didn't know that I was going to be the first Hispanic judge. I just viewed it, based on my own experience as a lawyer, as a position where you really could make a difference.
Justice Reynoso spent the next 6 years on the Court of Appeal, often dissenting from the other two justices. Yet he avoided the fray of politics. All of that was about to change with his appointment to the California Supreme Court.
He's a man of outstanding intellect, superior judicial performance, high integrity, and a man of rare personal qualities. His reputation precedes him, and I'm confident that he will give great credit to the judiciary, to the people of California, and to our finest traditions of law.
I can think of no greater honor for a sitting judge or a lawyer than to be asked to serve on our Supreme Court.
Justice Reynoso is considered a liberal, so it's not surprising his nomination has evoked opposition from law and order advocates.
It means people who do not have the best interests of the people of California in mind, who are a little junta, that operate the state the way they want to operate it without any...
The climate had a lot to do with it at the time. The people. There was this drumbeat of courts being soft on crime, liberal activist judges. The death penalty was lurking in the background on the high court at all times.
I would gather from what you're saying that either you don't have an opinion or you're not willing to state it clearly, either as to whether you are...
Excuse me, George, I think he's indicated he'll follow the law.
If a capital punishment case comes before you, are you going to avoid the enforcement and the imposition of the death penalty?
The implication of your question is, will I try to avoid the death penalty? And the answer is absolutely not. Deukmejian, by that time, was Attorney General. He had declared his candidacy for the governorship, and his main campaign was going to be the death penalty. So he had made it clear this was a political campaign for him, and it was clear that he was going to vote against me. So I was confirmed on a 2-to-1 vote.
Hear ye, hear ye, hear ye. The Honorable Supreme Court sitting in bank for the ceremonial investiture of Cruz Reynoso.
Not only is Justice Reynoso's appointment an important symbol of our democratic system of government, it is deserved recognition for a very fine lawyer, a thoughtful judge, and a kind and tolerant individual.
And I'm just glad that you will be around in the state government for many, many years. My father once told me that the most important thing you do as a governor is the judges that you appoint. And I am very proud of each one of them, all for different reasons, but all of them collectively. Thank you very much, and thank you, Cruz.
I, Cruz Reynoso,
I, Cruz Reynoso,
do solemnly swear
that
I will support and defend.
When Justice Reynoso was nominated and confirmed to the California Supreme Court, it was with a great deal of pride that I responded or reacted, because at that point I was president of the Mexican-American Bar Association.
When Cruz went to the California Supreme Court, it was the hope of some of us that he might be the first Hispanic to be nominated and to be seated on the United States Supreme Court.
The court Reynoso joined was known as the Rosebird Court, named after its Chief Justice. Its rulings favoring the rights of employees, criminal defendants, consumers, and the poor and disenfranchised made the court a controversial one.
During that time, 90-some% of all criminal cases that were appealed to the Supreme Court were upheld, as they always had been.
While the Byrd Court affirmed most convictions, it executed no criminals. This infuriated conservatives.
This court will not allow anybody to be executed in California. It's held itself above the law. It's allowed its own philosophies to dictate its decisions.
Opponents of the court received a boost when Ronald Reagan was elected president. And a few years later, George Deukmejian became governor. Both had run on law and order platforms.
There was a kind of a perfect storm where you had an increasingly conservative electorate that was concerned about law and order.
When Rosebird came up for reconfirmation in 1986, the forces against her accelerated their attacks.
I think a lot of the corporate interests that financed that recall effort had economic motives because of decisions of the California Supreme Court upholding corporate regulation or liability in products liability cases.
The business community's opposition to the court lacked a hot-button issue until they joined forces with law and order advocates accusing Rosebird of being soft on crime.
Next May, that rapist could be on the streets again because Rosebird and the Supreme Court reversed an appellate court decision and said they did not think the victim had experienced great bodily injury.
Business and law and order interests created a formidable alliance.
Anti-Bird groups have outspent her 4-to-1.
We've done $1 million worth of mailings.
Rosebird, bye-bye birdie package.
The following program was paid for by Californians to defeat Rosebird.
Cruz and I were not the targets of that criticism at first.
They didn't include us in their ads. They didn't include us in the attacks. We were just those other guys.
Most people didn't know who we were, so we thought we'd probably be all right.
But they weren't all right. Ousting Rose Byrd alone would not change the direction of the court. Needing 3 new judges to gain the majority, conservatives launched an ad campaign targeting Reynoso and Grodin as well as Byrd.
They're operating as vigilantes, a law unto themselves.
Judicial error, public safety is jeopardized.
The court has
denied justice to victims.
On Election Day, cast 3 votes for the death penalty. Vote no on Rose Byrd, Cruz Reynoso, and Joseph Grodin.
The campaign made it appear that there were hordes of people out there in the streets of California, murderers who had been released by the California Supreme Court.
A reversal didn't mean that folk were out on the street. The very least it meant was they would be in jail for the rest of their lives and that the death penalty portion would be tried again.
Next to Rose Byrd, Reynoso was considered the most vulnerable member of the court. If both should be denied reconfirmation, the governor will appoint their successors, and that could give the court his first conservative majority in decades.
I met personally with Cruz Reynoso and separately with Joe Grodin, and I told them that many of us believed they might go down, and we didn't want them to go down, and that they should separate themselves from Rose Byrd. Both refused. They both felt they had a loyalty to their Chief Justice.
They didn't take the challenge seriously. I don't think Chief Justice Byrd, despite the urgings of friends and colleagues that she do something, didn't see it to be proper for her to raise money and to come out with a vigorous campaign. The same thing with Justices Reynoso and Grodin.
If a judge must go out and protect himself or herself in terms of raising money, organizing political committees and so on, that has the unfortunate reality of mixing politics with justice. And
he could not bring himself to ask people to assist him. He felt that a justice should not be calling on individual lawyers because justices should be above the political influence. Justices should be independent.
You have to have money, and in order to get money, you have to ask for it. Whether I asked for it or not, money came in. And money came in largely from lawyers. How could I sit on the bench and hear an argument between 2 lawyers, one of whom had contributed to my campaign and the other did not, and I had to know that because all of this stuff has to be reported.
all of those who were attacking the court were Republicans. The Democrats were so afraid of the death penalty issue that none of them came to our support.
I will continue to support the death penalty, and I will not endorse or oppose the retention of any of the present justices.
The people who were attacking the court were people who were politically motivated, who did not really care at all about the role of the judiciary or of an independent judiciary and impartial judiciary. What they wanted were people in those seats who would vote the way that they wanted them to vote.
We had everything there except the black crepe hanging from the halls. It was a very, very devastating time.
The unseating of Cruz Reynoso was profound. Obviously, for many of us, it was a very personal loss and a symbolic loss. But the loss was profound for all of the public interest community and, for that matter, for the state of California.
It was quite likely that it would have a long-term chilling effect on judges. The public really didn't know what it had done, that it had been seriously manipulated by right-wing forces.
I thought that they were highly principled judges, and so it was a loss to the state to lose them. But there was an even greater loss, and that was an impairment what resulted was an impairment. I don't want to say destruction, but an impairment of the independence of the California judiciary, and that is a grave problem.
The constitutional rulings, which in the past have been described as great rulings, rulings, for example, that protected the right of Japanese Americans to own land in California, rulings that protected the people of this state to be able to buy housing irrespective of race, are rulings that the Supreme Court issued at a time when public passion was against those feelings. Now we look back with great pride that the Supreme Court was courageous, that it stood for the Constitution, that it stood for equality. But I think we have to ask ourselves, how likely is that to happen if judges worry about whether their opinions are making powerful political or economic interests in this state happy or unhappy?
When Cruz Reynoso was recalled, that was a very sad moment, but he viewed it much more broadly, and he understood it maybe better than we did. Because one of the things that Cruz stands for is persistence and diligence, and knowing that these battles in our life will knock us down every once in a while, but it's important to get up and go at it again.
To me, it was just a political defeat. I was determined, however, to show them that a political defeat does not defeat a person, a human being. Part of the fun of being in a little mini farm like ours, we have 30 acres and have the cattle and the pony and the peacocks and the cats and the dogs, is that you're required to be involved in physical effort. Once you have animals or once you have plants, we have the apple tree here and we have the vineyards, those things have to be done when they have to be done. So in some ways it's a necessity, but more than that, for me at least, it's a pleasure. I like to work out. Mira esta negrita. Ahí tienes. Ahí está, que les vaya bien. It's a very, very, very nice thing to do after the hecticness of being a lawyer or a law professor or being involved in all the matters of controversy that I'm involved in.
In 1994, President Clinton named Reynoso to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, and 6 years later, awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Cruz Reynoso is the son of Mexican immigrants who spent summers working with his family in the fields of the San Joaquin Valley. As a child, he loved reading so much, his elementary school classmates called him El Profe, the professor. Later, some told him to put aside his dreams of college, saying bluntly, they will never let you in. But with faith in himself and the values of our country, Cruz Reynoso went on to college and to law school, but never forgot his roots.
I didn't grasp the giant steps he was taking. He was just my brother. When he was given the medal, it really hit me, wow, my brother is really big stuff.
Ask one question if that's what if you have a question. Yes, Vice Chair.
One of the problems we were told under testimony was that I viewed my work on the commission as sort of an extension of the things that I had been concerned about all my life, and then finally having the power to do a little something about it.
As Vice Chair of the Civil Rights Commission, Reynoso was once again thrust into the national spotlight.
I told my brother we were going to carry Florida for him. Is that going to be a truthful statement? It better be.
In 2000, with the presidential election drawing near, a massive drive in Florida registered a record number of new African-American voters. Florida was a swing state, and the race looked close.
On the day that the election was taking place, a number of people called the commission to complain that they were having problems voting and that no one would listen to them.
We heard word during the election that things were not right. So we sent a couple of investigators on election day, and they reported to us there were all kinds of problems.
Nothing was settled on Election Day. Voter complaints poured into the Civil Rights Commission. 3 weeks later, 537 votes in Florida determined the outcome of the election.
On behalf of the State Elections Canvassing Commission, and in accordance with the laws of the state of Florida, I hereby declare Governor George W. Bush the winner of Florida's 25 electoral votes for the President of the United States.
The discussion that Cruz and I had when we were thinking about whether to proceed with an investigation was that this was such a high-stakes enterprise because it focused on the presidential election that it would be problematic and we would be putting ourselves at risk as an agency. However, that it could be the agency's finest hour.
We saw the statistics coming in. The statistics indicated that 10 times more of the votes cast by African Americans were disqualified than by non-African Americans.
We had large numbers of students with problems, switching of precincts without prior notification, misinformation at precincts, and students who had attempted to register numerous times and never received registration and were never entered into the system.
They were young people looking forward to exercise their franchise, and they didn't get to vote.
All of the problems and concerns in Florida.
I felt sick that here these young people were hopeful they were going to make a difference in how the country was run, and that was denied them.
We did have some complaints about the number of people that went to the poll and their name had been purged from the roll.
He said, well, we have you listed as a convicted felon. You have been purged from our system. You've lost all your civil rights.
I'm just curious to know what that feels like when you've been told that you were a convicted felon and you no longer have your civil rights.
I was slingshotted into slavery. That's how I felt.
Folk in Florida, by law, cannot vote if they've been convicted of a felony. The officials who had been hired by Ms. Harris's office to list all of the ex-felons testified that they asked the officials what sort of list they wanted. Did they want those who they were sure were ex-felons, or did they want anybody who possibly could be an ex-felon? The instructions were to put down anybody who possibly was an ex-felon.
There's no doubt the list included a number of what we call false positives, as the Division of Election required the exceptions list to be very broad.
I was especially surprised at how blatant the felon purge was when the state was told that the thing would be erroneous, and they simply said, well, just go ahead and do it anyway.
The governor and others framed it as being something wrong only with the mechanics of it. That is the hanging chads and all that. Not true. It's a whole system meant to discourage some people from voting, encourage others from voting.
It disproportionately affected African Americans. And it also disproportionately affected people who were going to vote Democratic, because most of the African Americans had planned to vote Democratic.
During the recount, there had been heated arguments about which votes could be counted and when they could be submitted.
2, 4, 6, 8. How many recounts does it take?
When Palm Beach County requested an extension on their recount, Catherine Harris refused to grant it.
In light of your testimony on the importance of every single vote, and in light of the Supreme Court opinion saying that if your office was open, you could receive it, but you could also receive it Monday, why in the world didn't you just simply not open the office on Sunday, knowing that that request was there, and accept the votes on Monday to honor the votes of those folk who had voted in that county?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I can tell you that as we met on Sunday, we went round and round about the issue from the time
what
that
came across was an indifference to the way in which so many thousands of people had been disenfranchised. And this was extraordinarily upsetting to all of us, but I think particularly to Cruz. It just flew in the face of what we think of as the responsibility of public officials, and particularly officials in that kind of job who really are charged with safeguarding our democracy.
It's been nearly 6 months now since those bitterly contested 537 votes put George W. Bush in the White House. But today, a new report from the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights is pouring gasoline on the embers. In the report's own words, it is the most extensive investigation of the Florida vote to date. 100 witnesses, 30 hours of testimony, 118,000 pieces of paper.
We were the only official group to have hearings and do a study. The Senate didn't, the House didn't, Justice Department didn't. So the whole matter, I thought, was a disaster and a black eye on democracy in America.
Decided to do not what you thought.
But the Commission's dogged persistence did result in new voting rights protections.
The findings of the report were certainly important in helping move Congress to adopt the Help America Vote Act, so-called HAVA. It set a tone, I think, for elections since, for greater vigilance, both by officials and by folks in the public interest community on the outside.
The lesson they should learn from 2000 in Florida is that we need a comprehensive look at how we do this and ways to make it better so that everybody has the opportunity to vote for the person of their choice, and that their vote will be counted and that they won't be turned away when they're valid voters.
Throughout his tenure on the Civil Rights Commission, Reynoso continued to teach law. Since 2001, he has been on the faculty of UC Davis Law School.
Was that he had referred to a female attorney as a lawyerette. He referred to the woman attorney general as attorney generalette, and asked another woman attorney why she wasn't wearing a necktie. And the hearing recommended a private reprimand. It goes to the Supreme Court.
It's been great to have Professor Reynoso as a professor in law school because of the way that he engages the students in issues of race and social justice. I came to law school and wanted to really be a public interest lawyer, and to hear all the great things that he's been able to accomplish in that field is absolutely inspiring for me as a young attorney just getting started in that field.
Cruz Reynoso, when he became a law professor in the 1970s, was probably one of a handful of Latino law professors. We're now in a law school environment where there are several hundred Latino law professors. He's had an incredible impact just in that one way as a law professor, which is one of many parts of Cruz Reynoso's career.
You remember 1971 when William H. Wren was nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court by then President Richard Nixon?
And Cruz came up with the appropriate strategy of not just opposing and being negative, but say, look, there's other options.
You know, when Thurgood Marshall was appointed to U.S. Supreme Court, the first black on the U.S. Supreme Court in 1968, you know, we figured when we nominated somebody in 1971, you know, it might be another 5 or 10 years and we would have somebody on the Supreme Court. But now, it's 39 years later, we have Justice Sonia Maria Sotomayor. Our next goal is perhaps get a Native American on the Supreme Court.
Or an Asian American?
Yes.
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede. Sí se puede.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited too. Of the many responsibilities granted to a president by our Constitution, few are more serious or more consequential than selecting a Supreme Court justice.
I was thrilled that Judge Sotomayor was appointed and that she was a person who in an urban setting had gone through some of the same suffering and same issues that I had gone through in a then rural community. So I understood that she would be a special person bringing something special to the Supreme Court, and I thought it was a wonderful step forward in our country's history and our country's jurisprudence. I had really never met Judge Sotomayor until a program at Bolt Hall where I had graduated from law school. She had been invited as a speaker, and I was asked to introduce her. I don't even remember the remark about the wise Latina judge. To me, it seemed so logical and non-controversial that I didn't even remember that until it was much quoted when she was nominated to the Supreme Court, and I started getting phone calls from the press all over the country. Well, how about this? What did you say? How did you feel about it?
And one of the things that I need to be assured of is that you understand the world as it pretty much really is. And we got a long way to go in this country, and I can't find the quote, but I'll find it here in a moment. A wise Latino quote.
Does the personal experience of a judge assist in providing a better jurisprudence for the country or for the state? Frankly, I thought it was a silly question. Of course it does. That's why we have 9 justices on the U.S. Supreme Court. That's why we have 7 justices on the state Supreme Court.
And in the wider context, what I believe the point I was making was that our life experiences do permit us to see some facts and understand them more easily than others.
To me, it was perfectly logical that a wise Latina judge who might have had different experiences than other folk would have something to add to the court. That's the way judges learn from one another. I was the only person on the Supreme Court who ever worked as a farm worker. If issues came up pertaining to that, I obviously would know more than my colleagues, and I'm sure she's the only Supreme Court justice who was in the poverty sections of New York. And so she has that experience, and I think that will bring riches to the Supreme Court and make for wiser, if you will, opinions out of the Supreme Court.
Probably unbeknownst to him, he has been serving as a role model for many generations of Latinos in the profession. It's hard for me to believe that he thought he was setting out on some crusade and that many people would follow him. I think that he just followed his own instincts, his own conscience, his own sense of social justice, and did what was right. Fortunately, he has kept his path. Others have seen him and admired his work, and by that nature he's become really a leader in the cause of social justice for all of people.
The Cruz Reynoso that I know as the Supreme Court Justice of California is the same Cruz Reynoso that I knew in that little town, El Centro. Cruz has always been the same person, so his honesty and his integrity has always been intact. And when we think of all of the journey that he has had and that he remains the same human being, I think that's quite remarkable.